You're listening to Gone Mobile, your input and output for all things .NET MAUI and mobile.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Gone Mobile. Alan, it's summer is winding down.
No, it's
not.
Is
it still summer up there?
Yeah, it's not. It's the middle of summer.
It's the middle, but yeah, that means we're over the hill.
Are we? I feel like it stays warm until like October. Yeah. I know all of our US crowd thinks we live in igloos and stuff, but it's actually still probably 20 degrees until October-ish.
Well, it was hot here this week. Hot. Today's a bit nicer, a bit rainier, but makes you kind of want to, go unplug and read a book or try to use an app that, doesn't have internet connectivity.
Oh, wow. Your lead-ins are getting that much better, dude. Like, wow. Wow. So our topic today is connectivity out in the wild.
Ooh,
and John's lead-in was unplanned, believe it or not. I know it's hard to believe, but he wings these.
Yeah. They just come to me. That's why they're so bad.
And he's still typing notes in as we're reading.
I'm just thinking of stuff.
This is cool.
Yeah. So I mean, how often anymore do you end up in a situation that you don't actually have connectivity? Like I'm talking as a user even.
Quite a bit, actually. If you go, I want to say about 2 hours north of where I am. Okay, so up into the boondogs of Ontario. Yeah. And you live like a long stretch from, like there's a long stretch in Ontario on the 401 highway where there's nothing, right? It's like Hamilton and then London. Yeah. And then somewhere down there is Sarnia.
Chatham. Sarnia is kind of, more west, but.
Yeah, but still, it's close to you. It's slightly north, right?
Yeah. It's a decent ways.
So there's some dead areas in there still.
Yeah.
So it happens.
But the highways are pretty well lined, though. Yeah, maybe camping and stuff. But I feel like even like cottage country up in the Muskokas and stuff is pretty decently covered now because there's enough money there.
Is that really camping though?
It's it's not. I hate camping, glamping? And that's fine.
Yeah, okay. So
listen, I grew up on a farm, working on a farm, and so like whenever we went and took time off, like nobody wanted to be outside in the hot heat of the summer. We wanted to be at like a nice hotel.
You are one of the least farm people I know. You're the least farmer that I know.
Yeah. I mean, people sometimes had asked me that, like, well, why didn't you like take over the farm, do all that? It's like, I grew up in that. I wanted to go as far away from that as possible. That was the worst. No, thank you.
I bet you didn't have good cellular service back then on your farm.
No, probably not. I didn't get a cell phone until I was in university, actually.
I got it just before. It was like one of those Nokias. Remember the Nokias, how cool they were? Yeah.
Well, I was kind of more weird than that. I went with, I had a cheap, nothing phone for the first phone. And then I went with a Sony Ericsson, I think.
Oh, I remember those.
Yeah. And it had like Sync ML and stuff. I'm talking about offline. I mean, Sync. Do you ever mess with that? It was like a way to sync contacts and calendar stuff and emails, kind of before like Active Sync was a thing.
Oh, we're going even back to like Palm Pilot era.
Oh yeah, like I stood up my own SyncML server and everything, and like I had my first data plan that I think had like 15 megabytes or something a month, and I figured, okay, if I like sync twice a day, I can make this work. It's gonna be fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Age is showing. But so again, you're not a farmer.
No, I'm not, and I'm not that old either. Like I'm. What am I? I'm going to be 40 next year, so I'm getting there.
I'm over that hill, unfortunately. So my grades are showing.
At least we're not as old as David yet, so there's that.
Had to get that. I doubt he's listening.
I'm assuming he's not even listening to these. So, but if he is, he'll get the joke. It's good.
He likes to hear our Canadian humor.
Yeah. So it hasn't been that long since that wasn't that many years ago, and I had some data at one point, right? But before that, there was no offline. Like everything was offline. You had texts, right? You could send texts.
Remember that? Did you ever see a GPS thing back in the day? Like
Oh
how
yeah,
bad they were? Like they
yeah,
were like bigger than cell phones. Like
yeah.
some of them even
We
had
had
cranks
one.
on them. They had cranks. I'm like, you had to
Yeah.
crank the hell out of those things to keep them, like to get them on if they were completely dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like you could hear it like whine to start up, and it had this humongous antenna. Like it made cell phone antennas at the time.
Yeah.
Like we're talking like the 80s cell phones,
Oh
like huge
yeah,
brick
yeah.
with like the
yeah.
4-foot long antenna on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like these things made them look small, but it was crazy. I mean, it worked, and the map looked like absolute hell. Like I'm not even sure how you used it to find your way out, to be perfectly honest. It was like, here's some, it was more like looking at one of those old monochrome monitors, and you'd be like, yeah,
I got the
I'm not even
direction,
sure
I
what to do with
guess.
this, man. I'm just going to get out the compass and walk in a direction.
Yeah.
Great.
No, I didn't really ever use, like I saw those around. I never really used those. My first foray into GPS stuff was more like once you had like the very early car units, like, a Garmin or whatever
Yeah.
that you could stick in the car and pay $1 million every year. You wanted to update the maps, so you didn't do it. So then, you went somewhere and you're like, this isn't right. The maps aren't correct.
Well.
But yeah, they were good. I mean, I remember still, doing like road trips with my wife when we were first married and stuff, just using maps before we even had GPS units.
Oh yeah, that's almost far boyish. Well, nowadays definitely would be now.
Yeah, I know. So everything has GPS now. I think one of the interesting things, I've not ever used it yet, or I don't even know if I technically can at this point. You know how so now Apple and I think Google's getting on that bandwagon too. You can do SMS like over satellite.
Yep.
Have you tried that? Have you used that?
I have not. I haven't been to a spot where I can really put it to the test, but
yeah,
I know it's coming. Is it already there? Technically, it's already there. Is it not?
I think it is. I don't know. Like being in Canada, we don't always get new features and stuff right away. Like it's kind of the same thing.
I feel like a satellite thing we should get right away because
right,
dude, so, it's floating over top of us too.
Right, and like Canada's huge, right? And like you said, as soon as you get a little bit away from where you are, like stuff starts dropping out. I was surprised when we went a couple summers ago to Prince Edward Island. We ended up, I mean, just being out there, it's not a big island. You'd think that thing would have like full coverage of the whole area. No, not at all. Like, we'd get to like the house where we're at. And I just remember I had to like make some calls for work stuff that was like urgent. And like, I'm on vacation, I'm not working, but I needed to call a couple of people. And I'm like looking around the property that we had the rental on, like for the place that I got reliably like 1 bar, of 3G even, so that I could maybe plausibly make a voice call. And that was the experience there. So it really wasn't a given that you had connectivity there. And then what was worse is we ended up having to drive home, which is like a 20-hour drive because we all got COVID. And this was, right in the middle. We're like, we could have done the thing where we don't say anything and we get on the airplane and we fly home and we're kind of, jerks about it. But I couldn't do that in good conscience. So we made the decision to drive home. And then all the way driving home, it's like, yeah, between cities, there's nothing, even along the highway.
I mean, that sucks. So you're sick. You have no signal. So you've got whiny kids that are sick that can't. Well, I mean, tablets and movies off.
Yeah, they still had. I mean, well, this is just it for apps, right? Like some of the stuff they use worked.
Yeah.
We always make sure to have them like download the offline movies and stuff before we go on a trip like that. But there's certain like games and stuff that they would want to play, right? That they're like, it doesn't work if I can't. It's like the game has nothing to do with online, but because there's no connection, it couldn't, do something. Couldn't contact an ad server, couldn't phone home. And so they're like, no, it doesn't work. Sorry.
Well, and that's most apps. Right. Unfortunately, still today, a lot of the bigger apps, they just no internet, no app.
I mean, my app's kind of like that. It works, but you can't save anything.
Well, yeah. Why not? That's pretty easy to save. No.
Well, yeah. I haven't done it. It's. I mean, we talked about this in the past a bit with offline data,
and just
right?
do a job and let it send.
Yeah, it was more. I didn't want to deal with like the duplicate, stuff and sorting out that part of the puzzle. Like I probably could do a pretty easy version of it, but I just haven't wanted to.
You think it good?
Yeah. So yes.
There you go.
Well,
Easy to do.
So what I do now is when you add a new record, it has to round trip to the server, and then I send it back, and then that is what your ID is. Like you don't assign it an ID locally. The server does.
Okay. Well.
So I've had the thought of doing something silly, like could I make like a special convention in my identifier that for locally saved things that haven't yet been gone through that, right? Like call it like local dash GUID, and then why?
You do the ID on your end, on the client end.
Yeah, I could do that too.
And you put a date last synced, and it's null if it's never synced, which means you got to push it.
Yeah.
I've done enough offline data now. I think it's kind of burned into my head, and I've seen the crap that people do to try and solve this problem. Don't do that.
I mean, it's just shortcutting one column. So yeah, arguably it's the same thing, but it's stupid. Fine.
But a lot of people ask, so this is something I'm working on now, is like, does GPS work in the woods on my phone?
Right.
Well, if you have some of those crappy Android phones, the answer is no. Some of them are only
it's like assisted GPS, right? Is that the term?
Well, iPhone is like, it'll do a full GPS as far as I know. Like it's pretty darn skippy the way I think it's still slightly based off of cellular to a degree, so it still uses some.
Well, like and why wouldn't they, right?
Analog towers.
Yeah.
Like
right? If you have the data, use it. But does it work if you don't have any of that data is kind of the thing, right?
And shockingly, quite well. It does work quite well. So years ago, my trip, I went up to northern Quebec, like the tip of Quebec. And you want to talk no internet, there was none. And the funny part is that, so my truck had a built-in GPS, and the GPS was all offline, but that thing got so flippin' lost up there. The place where my buddy got this cottage was like, it couldn't have been any more in the bush, literally. Like you had to drive down this dirt road for like 25 minutes, and then all of a sudden you're here. But my GPS and the map was just like, it got up there, and all of a sudden it would just freeze. And then all of a sudden I'd show up like 3 kilometers ahead. I'm like, where am I? Turns out it skipped me right past this dirt road. So I ended up going an hour north still, going, talking to my friend, like, dude, I keep losing internet. So I'm texting you from wherever the heck city I'm in now. And he's like, oh yeah, you're way too far. And I'm like, where is this dirt road and sign you're talking about? And there was a sign it had no lights on it. And I'm driving up there at like 1 a.m. It's 1 a.m. in the morning. A sign with no lights. Thanks, dude. Like that's great. Yeah. And my GPS in that area, nothing. Total gonzo show. My phone, no internet.
Sign. You drive past the house with the red barn and the square roof, and that's where the road is.
Right. And the funny part is that my phone, the GPS was working on it. So my truck had given up. That I was about ready to like weld the whole damn system out and throw it, but suffice it, I did not. But here's my phone. It has internet, it has GPS, but no internet. So the maps are blank. And you're like, dude, how did we get here?
You really take for granted that kind of thing. I luckily, I think I've hit enough of those situations that usually, depending where I'm going, I kind of know if I should bother being prepared. Like when we went to Belize in February, I'm like, okay, I'll have an eSIM. So that's another kind of thing. This isn't really developer stuff, but at the same time, it is kind of interesting how it enables users more. Like it used to be, you got to go find a SIM card at a store if you want data in another country, right? So like, good luck. And then like, oh, they're going to want your passport. Who knows what the cost and plan is going to be, all that stuff. And anymore, like, I don't know if you've used this yet. I've done it a bunch, like using the eSIM cards. Like there's a few apps out there that'll sell like different temporary SIM cards for whatever country, right? So I knew that we were going to have data when we got there, but I didn't know how good of coverage was in that country. So I'm like, okay, go into my map apps, download offline maps for, the whole country in both Apple and Google Maps, because who knows?
Never know.
You never know. And then hope that those still work reasonably well with GPS without, internet.
But the funny part is that you can do that nowadays because our phones are like, I mean, I'm sure you still find a way to fill your phone, but my phone still, I got tons of space.
Well, and the maps aren't that big anymore. Like, I think because a lot of the maps are now like vector-based stuff. So it's not,
they have come a long ways, but
be.
If you download the map of Ontario, it's about 500 or 600 megs, I think.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And if you include all the landmarks, it gets up to like a gig.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's still not bad. We're talking about these humongous phones now, but back then.
Yeah, that used to be.
Even on the 3GS, I had a 3GS. And like, I don't even remember how big those were. Like 16 gig? Are they 16 gig?
Something like that.
I think maybe even at that was like the top one.
Yeah.
So I want to even say they were like 8 gigs. So you were like, man, that no. I need room for my games. Why do I want a map that's offline? Well, fast forward and it was like, I wish I had that map offline. So a lot of map providers are out there nowadays. I mean, back then you had Google Maps and there was no such thing as Apple Maps. And when Apple Maps did come in, it was awful. I think it's a lot better now. I've actually had to get rid of Google Maps because there's been a lot of issues with it lately. But if you're using Google Maps, I know a lot of people say, oh my God, it's expensive, because it is. They're like mega moolah. I think they sell themselves as like this is the premier service. If you're complaining about it, we're not for you. I think that's kind of their...
Yeah, it's kind of like if you want everything and you don't want to have to think about it, then this is your answer and you just have to pay us for it. If you want a subpar version of that, well, go for it.
And I mean, they're like I want to say 10 times the cost of everybody else. Like, it's that bad. So I see a lot of other things out there. Like I'm using Mapbox right now. It's okay. API is a little funky, but it does do offline. Obviously there's the big ones like Esri, ArcGIS. I think that's like for our ecosystem, like Maui and .NET in general, they're like the kind of gold standard.
Is there like, are they, I always kind of viewed them more as like a commercial provider, right? Well, like it's not so much like, I get we're talking about building apps. So like it presumably they're just, as good in terms of if you want to put an app, map in your app as Google or Apple in terms of features and stuff. Yep.
They're obviously pricey as well, but if you compare apples to apples with Google, they're quite a bit cheaper. The other thing is that maybe somebody else knows this, but Google was always a pain in the arse to get offline.
Okay.
Like in your app, there's a lot of times where you're like, I want to put my own map data in, which is obviously fairly easy to store offline, but there's no APIs, at least that I'm aware of still to date, where I can go, in my app, I want to tell it to download Ontario.
So like tile data and point of interest data too.
Yeah, just download it. So let me see the option and tell the user, this is how much space we're about to take, and do the thing. But there is no API as far as I know.
No,
and Apple Maps is the same deal. I have never seen anything that I can do in my app to say, we need the data because.
Yeah. I mean, I've never tried to build something like that really. But I'm one thought that comes to mind that I'm curious about it. I would assume that, let's say let's use Apple as the example, because it's like baked into the OS, right?
Fair.
If I'm on Apple Maps and I go into the app and I download an offline area, does an app using Maps have access to that data too, I wonder?
Yes. It's all built in.
This is not at all a reasonable workaround, but of course you could tell the, a user, if you plan to use this offline, like go download, the cache there.
Yeah. You tell me one product manager that will live with that answer going, no,
terrible.
This is a horrible user experience. And it's like, well, it's not really that awful because it's going into the phone settings, but it would be nice if we could do it on their behalf and say, look, you're planning to go to this area. So a lot of apps have like a point of interest anyways. That's why they want maps in their app.
Right.
So they might be like, okay, well, you're going from here to here. We're going to capture all that data for you because we know that your internet is going to suck. Or we want to make sure if your internet does suck that you have that data so you can't yell at us that we didn't do the thing.
Right. And especially like in certain industries, right? Like there's like, I know there's like trail map kind of apps and that stuff too. I would think that generally, those types of apps, the use case is going to often be, yeah, we don't know about connectivity on these areas that you want the map for.
Right. I mean, I think Matthew Robbins out in Australia, they're doing that cool Maui app with Unity and climbing. It's got like a climbing app.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it's got maps. I haven't seen it yet, but a lot of people are talking about it. Dude makes gold, right? Everything he does seems to turn to gold. So I know this app has been getting a lot of attention. And I have to guess that the middle of Australia, I mean, if you're from Australia, feel free to tell me I'm an ignorant idiot, but I'm going to guess not a lot of internet coverage there.
Yeah.
Just to guess.
The bigger the country, the more sparse the population. Like, of course, there's just not going to be.
That's right. So I got to imagine he's doing stuff like that. And he's obviously got point of interest data in there. Yeah. So you're going to want that offline. So they got to do the things. I'm trying to think what other map. So we got ArcGIS, Google and Apple Maps kind of, they're there, but they're not really feature rich either.
Now does Mapbox, like, did they have different tile providers, or like you can plug different things in, right? Like in your own custom thing. But do they also offer their own data source of maps, or like is it just OpenStreetMaps? And
nope, they have. So Mapbox is their own kind of tiles. There's Open Maps, OpenStreetMaps, which is interesting because a lot of people abuse poor OpenStreetMaps because they're kind of free.
Yeah.
But people cache their images or their tiles. It's kind of a jerk thing to do, but so be it. I guess that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But that works relatively well. I know OpenStreetMaps is really up to date. Like it's all off volunteers.
Yeah, and it's like Wikipedia for maps, right?
Oh yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how up to date those maps are. Just in my area, I was looking the other day. I was like, wow, you guys have done. This is good. This is top notch.
I need to look again at it. So I think, and I don't know exactly the blend, but so my car, Tesla, uses some amount of OpenStreetMap data. I think they combine. They're not clear about it, right? But I think they combine like speed limits and stuff with vision based, seeing a speed limit sign. So we have this one street by our house. If we're going up to the 401, it always like there's a point at which it turns speed limit of 80 kilometers an hour, but it always thinks that it's 50. And so like if you try and set autopilot on, especially not like the full whatever thing that you have to pay a bunch of money for that arguably sucks anyway. It'll only let you go 10 over the posted speed limit because reasons. And so when you hit that zone, if you don't think about it and you have autopilot on, it just starts braking, right? Because it's like, oh, it's 50. I got to slow. Like I was going 90. I got to slow down to 60. So
all the people behind you are like, my goodness, how old is this guy driving? Get him off the road.
It's not usually that bad. But in that one spot it is. And I did a while back go into OpenStreetMap. I'm like, I'm going to submit a fix and like see if this ever bubbles up. And I haven't driven that road in a while that I've used autopilot. So I don't know if it's kind of come down, but like that's there's a bunch of people using it. The data, you can go in and fix it up yourself, which is kind of cool.
So the question here is that obviously that data is online. If it's using a combination, or they must be getting that data through some cell signal at some point.
Oh yeah. The car's always got, a cell signal going. Oh. They also do like live traffic data. I think that's all sourced from Google.
Well, I guess Tesla can technically piggyback on the what's Musk's satellite internet.
It doesn't, but yeah, I mean in theory, maybe
it should.
That's one day. Yeah,
he's doing something wrong. We'll put the two together, connect the dots, man.
Well, I can't charge enough money for that to be trolling the internet. Then how else are you going to do that?
Well, fair.
Yeah.
So we've got GPS.
Mm-hmm.
We got maps, lots of maps. Esri is out there. It's got dotnet-maui support. It's fantastic. Again, gold standard. Google, Apple, not kind of just crap for general features and overall offline support. So they're just kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
There's Mapbox, which I know there's several big companies that have bindings for it, but it's not a trivial binding. I know there's a person in the community that's maintaining a binding, but I think he's got just a small subset of the important features because they're big.
And maybe it's like there was a couple years because I always used Mapbox as like my
your prototype
sample,
thing.
right? Like because it was always a nasty one to have to bind because there's a huge dependency tree and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Big API surface, like it's not a trivial thing.
Still
and
isn't.
and for a while there they kept like making fairly big breaking changes between versions, and so it was like, okay, you'd get like one binding done to the whatever version 4 or something, and then version 5 comes out and you're like, they changed everything, and it is basically a rewrite. So hopefully it's calmed down a little bit.
A little bit. Now we're in version 11, and they're ripping through version 11. I think they're at 0.6, and I think they just started version 11 beginning just at the end of last year. So lots of changes, but that's good. You got to evolve, but the binding is difficult.
Yeah. I mean, maybe one day we'll actually get lucky and some of these vendors will, have enough customers that are like, hey, we want Maui stuff, and they'll think about doing it themselves.
It's funny because they have, so I'm using Syncfusion for a couple things, and they have like a maps. It's almost like a tile reader, right? So it's like a web. It just knows how to read the tiles out of like Mapbox because you give it like a URL template, and that it like basically the map servers end up becoming tile servers. Like what's your zoom distance? What's the GPS coordinates? Like your X, Y, and Z basically. Here's the tile. So it's stupid simple how these things end up working. Now, there's also one called Maps UI. People call it Maps UI.
Yeah.
I think that's David Ortnow's fault. I'm like, dude, it's Maps UI. It's Maps UI. Or what are you smoking?
Yeah.
I want some of it. So they're out there, and they're kind of like a tile provider as well. But no offline, because obviously the data becomes a little bit weird at that point, right? The shape systems don't work the same, right? So if I want to take in a huge vector database, obviously it's usually custom formats. I think it's really only Esri that does like a standard, the kind of SQLite databases, which is great for offline. Again, that's probably why they're the gold standard to us.
Yeah. No, Maps UI is that one free? How does that one work out?
So it's open source.
Okay.
There's several people maintaining it as far as I know, and it supports like everything. But really what it is it's a very smart way of just reading tiles and sucking them in. So it'll do OpenStreetMaps, it'll do Mapbox, it'll do, I don't know, you name it. I'm pretty sure it does pretty much all of them.
Okay.
Right? Because it's like, here's the tiles, get the tiles. But again, you have to go and register with the service because that's really what you're paying for at the end of it is, yes, you've been given an API, maybe some sort of nice SDK, but it's really the massive amounts of hits you're about to place on their server.
Yeah.
Right? Because, I mean, if you think about it, it's downloading like 1 trillion images all the time. I think even just from, my overview of Toronto, just to kind of take that top level view is usually about, 4 tiles across, 4 tiles down. So 16 tiles from a certain view, 16 images.
Yeah. So they're
server,
not doing vector stuff at all, or?
I think they are, but it doesn't quite like you can't really do tiles like that, right? Like it's weird. Well, I don't know. You tell me. But you can see the grid. You can see the grid of images it's downloading.
Oh yeah. I get. Yeah, but like, why can't those particular square of that grid be a vector form to speed things up? I don't know.
Slow to render. SVG. I know a lot of people are using it, but you have a lot of SVG on a website, and they tend to start.
Yeah. Well, SVG. I mean, don't get me started. I say it. Why aren't they vectors? And then in the same breath, I'll say like SVGs are terrible.
You know better. They're very harsh to render. That's why you've got resizatizer in Maui so that we don't have to go.
And that's even hard. Like SVGs, the problem with SVGs, if we're gonna, I need to get this off my chest.
Vent.
Yeah,
let's hear your rage,
is
John.
that the spec is basically a web browser.
Yeah,
like to implement them properly, there's like, styling. I think you can even technically have JavaScript in some of the newer SVG specs and stuff. Like it's a web browser, and you're asking to shove like potentially 100 of those on a page.
Yeah.
100 web views essentially. Like it's not quite the same, but it's in there.
The SVG.
Which is why like Google with Android had their Android vector drawables.
Of course. Yeah.
Which is a subset of it, which is basically like, okay, let's cut out all the heavy stuff and like you can have, paths and, shapes and stuff like that, which is not unreasonable. The problem is it was a really bad implementation.
Yeah, as Android does. Stop trying to reinvent the wheel.
So even with like resizatizer, you're going to run into cases where you have a vector that it just doesn't know how to properly parse out because it does crazy things. And same with any kind of area, right? Specs are how you should implement things. The reality of how people, actually implement those specs is a different thing in practice.
Do you feel better, John? Do you feel vented?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Thanks for listening. Yeah.
SVGs. Yeah. So that's why they don't do vectors. You answered your own question.
Okay.
Now,
got there?
I am pretty sure if you're doing offline formats, because if you watch how, and again, I don't know, I've never seen the source code, so I am ignorant to it. But if you watch kind of some of them, like the main SDKs with their own shapefiles, so like an ArcGIS, if you watch it render, it does look like it's taking vector data and rendering it in real time. Again, not the implementer.
Sure, I could ask the implementer. And they could do their own version of that too, right? Like it wouldn't be that crazy to, like, even if you think of just like the Shapes API that we have in Maui, like you could probably do something like that, define your own kind of subset of what a vector looks like.
Drawing some lines on the screen, man.
Yeah.
Doing it fast. So it exists. Maps are great. Offline is hard for them, and every vendor seems to have it slightly different. Yeah. What else? Just use ArcGIS or if you need a gold standard.
Yeah. No, there's some good options out there. And like if you're not a maps, first kind of heavy app, probably a lot of those are more than enough.
So I was out several years ago. We flew on a plane, and obviously flying has become a gong show of, WTF, what's going on here? Where are we sitting? Oh, you're not sitting beside the person that you booked the tickets with, 8 months ago. Yeah. They're going to sit way up there. And the other party you're traveling with, they're going to sit way back there. And the worst is that you still want to talk to them or send like funny jokes. But obviously, usually you get put on a plane. If it was that screwed up, you usually get put on a plane without internet. And I mean, both of us are getting internet the second we step on that plane.
Oh, yeah.
If it's there.
I don't remember the last time that I've flown that I didn't have internet.
Because, non-farmer John and definitely high maintenance me, I want my internet on a plane because I need something to do.
Well, and truthfully, like the last time I so a couple flights ago, maybe it was to Belize, we had internet, or like you could buy it, and I did, but the beginning of it was like, what if I set up my machine so that I'm pretty confident I can do this all offline, right? Just out of curiosity, and actually from a Maui perspective, there was there's always a little bit of a push to like these kind of air gap scenarios, like how if I install Visual Studio, do I have all the things I need to actually like build a Hello World Maui app? And the short answer is I don't know where that sits these days. I know there was like originally some kind of pushes to make sure it made sense. But at the end of the day, it's like with a computer, it's worse. And as a developer, it's worse because the minute you need something, you're like, oh, that package isn't cached locally and my project's trying to restore. Now I can't do anything. Or, I had it where I was testing with my app. And usually when I'm developing my app, I have a test server. I'll tell you that's what I use. Even locally developing, just to kind of not make it complicated and try and host stuff locally. I test against a server. And it's like, okay, I tried to do that on the one flight a few years ago that we didn't have the option to buy internet. And I had everything great except for that piece of the puzzle that I just hadn't thought of. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Like, there's no server here. So I ended up like, well, yeah, but you got to download that ahead of time then.
Why isn't it just on your machine, living and breathing?
Well, because I don't have like a Cosmos. Let's go back to Cosmos, right? So this thing's Cosmos based. So it's all that.
There's no Docker. Well, there's like some sort of strange ass emulator that they were high as a kite when they made.
What I ended up doing was I had my database or like data layer, as a service. So I ended up just making like a fake one, right, to plug in so I could throw it against. But that took up half the flight instead of working on the thing I wanted to work on.
Did you engineer it to the max though?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, okay. So on this flight, I had no internet because they had obviously already screwed up everything else. And it's like you still want to message somebody and be like, oh my God, I got this annoying person sitting beside me.
Right.
Or like, what are we going to do when we get there? Or, whatever stupid thing it was. Because there's no texting, right? And this was a huge flight we were on. So I didn't even know where, all the people I was flying with. Because of course I was like, I'll go sit by myself.
Right.
And then of course I don't pay any attention because now I'm, you know how when I get angry, I'm just like nuclear, right? So I'm like, I'm just going to go sit and I didn't pay any attention to anything going on because I was like, the stupid flight. So we got there and I was mad because we didn't know anything and like what we were going to do. We didn't have a good plan. We got off the plane. We didn't have a good plan to find each other. And it was like, it was just a mess. So going back, apparently we got the same kind of flight situation. So when we were on vacation, of course, I bring my laptop. I am a nerd. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I get ideas. I want to start coding something. And it'll be like one of those times where I'm like, I'm vacation burned. I've been in the sun for, 6 days. I'm just going to take a chill. Mm-hmm. So I ended up building a little BLE chat app because a lot of people go, well, if I want to trade data and there's no internet, like if you're out in the bush and I want to send you this photo,
how do you
why
do
do I
it?
need internet? So you can do it through Bluetooth. And it's actually quite fast. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, it's BLE, it's slow. Well, for a chat message, even if you're going to do multiple packets, you can still send that in the blink of an eye.
And if you want to do an image, you're not going to send the full 20 meg thing over probably, right?
I mean, you can, and it's not horrid, but it's not instantaneous.
Yeah. So you scale it down for your chat app and, it's like 500 kilobytes or not even instead. Nice little JPEG.
That's what I did. I scaled it down so you could still take a photo going, I am here, figure it out, right? And we were all chatting through this. It was a 747, not the biggest jet anymore, but we were chatting through this and sending pictures going, look at this weirdo in front of me.
How did, how did you make that? What was the architecture like? I guess like it was just peer to peer the whole way.
Yep.
Kind of like you send something to broadcast it out and you either got it or you didn't.
Yeah. I wasn't doing, well, I could see who got it. Right.
Okay. Right. You
if there was people in the chat. Right. So, I mean, I didn't put any authentication. So if somebody wanted to come in.
Oh, sure.
I mean, sure. If you know the protocol, go ahead. Like I just had a host running on each one and a client running on each one. And it was just a constant exchange. And you could see if they had, I put, so you could see if the message, they have read the message, if they had seen it. So it was pretty cool. And it got the job done. I could message people. Sometimes it would take a second. If there was like, if they were moving or whatever. And the app had to be hot, right? Because that's the thing. You can't run a BLE client like a host in the background. That's where iOS is no dice. Of course, I had one friend that was on Android. He was like, well, mine can do it. Okay.
Yeah, well, look at your battery at the end of the flight, okay?
Yeah, okay. So he had an Android, but it worked. It was a .NET-MAUI. I mean, I didn't make it look pretty, but that's not my forte. It doesn't have to look pretty, but it was quite functional. Could send a JPEG photo. We could all reply and laugh, and no emojis because I hate, well, surprisingly, I do hate emojis. They're quite annoying. We come from the ASCII era. We invented those damn things. They've been stolen from us. So it's just send a photo and send text and a name. And it had my name on it. Right? So
that's a neat way to do it. I mean, yeah, there's lots of, I remember Google used to have a library for this too, actually. I don't know whatever happened to it, if it's still a thing nearby.
The nearby sync, yeah. I think they still got something for it.
Yeah.
I think it's more for detectionary stuff, almost like beacons, but not beacons.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's still active. I know there's a binding for it. The Android team maintains one for it.
There probably is. I remember I did I don't even remember what the talk was on at one of the Evolve conferences. I think it was like on Play Services and stuff in general, and that was one of the new ones at the time. And I had made like a little app that everybody could go download in the audience, and then turn it on, and then it was like using the nearby API to like communicate back and forth and stuff, and find people. So it was a fun little thing.
Did it work?
Yeah.
I tried to make one for remember Dan Siegel had what was it called? Monkey Summit, or he's probably gonna kill me. Monkey Conf.
Oh yeah.
It was in Texas. And he was like, dude, can you make a beacon thing? Like, he gave me like a week to do it. I'm like, it's not gonna be that great. It's relatively new, what I'm doing here, but I'll see what I can do. And then we ended up getting some cheap beacons that flew in from somewhere on Amazon. They didn't work too well. And suffice it to say, it didn't end up working. Sorry, Dan. Tried. Next time we'll get the Rolls Royce. Actually, we did try and get the Rolls Royce of beacons at the time, which was Estimote. You remember seeing those?
Oh yeah,
for offline context location. And they were these pretty little rubberized beacons. They're gone now. I think now they just do, with all those IoT devices, they eventually roll into their own service.
Right.
So now you can't buy the Rolls Royce of beacons anymore because they're all like offline IoT.
Yeah.
Buyer services, and we'll check the temperature and the lighting and all that stuff. We don't need you. We don't need your apps.
No, exactly. That was a kind of a just a moment in time thing. All of those beacon stuff.
Well, the funny part is that all these IoT devices, it used to be you had to sync, like you had to go up to them, right?
Yeah.
And you had to talk to them with Bluetooth when you were in the field. But now everything, like almost all IoT devices now are LTE enabled, right?
Yeah.
Because you have like LTE providers that it's like prepaid through, like obviously your internet, you don't pay for it on your Tesla.
Right.
But it's like,
it's there.
It's included somehow.
Yeah.
You paid for it. You just don't know where and when. Probably when you got the car, that was like, we will charge you $500 for this thing. And you're like, okay. Right.
What, and there's also have you ever trying to remember the name of it? I think it's like a narrowband thing, but there's another like pseudo. LoRaWAN is the name of it that I was thinking of. Have you ever played with that?
Yeah, it's starting. That one's, I think it's newer. Ultra wideband or whatever. Maybe that's the new one. Where they're looking at like a much wider range of communication and location too, right?
Yeah.
Because with beacons, you couldn't actually figure out where the hell it was. It was just basically broadcasting and be like, I heard it. It's great. Where did you hear it from?
Right.
Point me in the direction.
Maybe that way. Probably.
So ultra wideband and a lot of the technologies, again, Apple and Google aren't talking on this, but they do exist in both OSs now. There's like I think it's that nearby thing you're talking about, and you can find directional. And it's funny because I'm working on that now. I'm working with a company right now where they're doing locations for their cameras. They're like these trail cameras. And it's like, how do you find the thing? Right? You basically, there's no direction. There's no ultra band radio in it. So you got to blink the light or alert a speaker. And you got to hope that, you can probably see the light in the dark, but during the day, no dice.
Right.
And how loud does the speak? I'm deaf, right? So if it's not loud and ear piercing, it'd be like, it sounded like a bird to me.
Well, and with that kind of thing, like I'm assuming in that scenario, what you would want to do is like when the camera is installed, as long as like the user remembers, like, let's like sync, my phone is right by the camera.
Yep.
So GPS wise, like remember that it was here, but that only gets you within whatever.
So the funny part is these LTE things will do that. Like a lot of them will have GPS, but it's non-specific. So it could be like 20 meters, right? And you're trying to find this thing and it's in trees.
So you're
like, so you can still get a BLE signal out to it, like it's listening. So you can broadcast a, hey, make a loud sound so I can hear like,
wake up and tell me something.
Yeah, so I can find you. So that's kind of like and that's a good like offline kind of scenario, because maybe the battery is like almost dead, so it can't do its LTE signal. Maybe it doesn't have an LTE signal for whatever reason, like it's dropped. An owl came and stood on its antenna and broke it off. Who knows? The wild things happen to stuff in the bush. So
yeah,
these are kind of some of those cool scenarios. And a lot of people don't write their apps like that. They just think it's no internet, no work.
Yeah.
Is it? You're dead. So, if then we're supposed to have a big solar storm, this like now
again,
right?
Another
one, a big one's coming.
Okay.
So, get ready, because what are we going to do if the internet's out? Bluetooth's your friend, man. You can still do data. Bluetooth 5. Actually, the funny thing is we were talking about that photo earlier sending. If you're using Bluetooth 5 and you can get like the coded 5 range, you can, I think it's up to 2 megabit at a range, like at a distance. So now we're talking, right? Like now I can push, some serious data with that.
That's not bad.
It's hard to get. Again, if you're working in the Android world, some of those Android phones are like, you don't need that. We want to be cheaper phone, cheaper Bluetooth chip. But anyhow, it is out there. So
that's not bad.
Yeah, 2 megabits, nothing to.
I mean, it's that'll get images back and forth reasonably fast. Like that's 2 megabit. Like I would have been thrilled with 2 megabit when we had dial-up. That would have been great.
Maybe the next thing I got to do for that app, because I still have that app. I was thinking about sharing it a while ago, but maybe I could do like FaceTime connection. It'd be like, I am here. Look for the guy giving the middle finger at the back of the plane. See me?
Yeah.
See me? I see you. Good. Thanks,
It's going to be like super, super low res to get that going through there.
Why? 2 megabit, man. I can make it look pretty.
Yeah,
That's not bad.
Yeah, if you're going to get 2 megabit with everybody and all the interference and all the rows in between you, no way.
That's fair. It is peer to peer. So, I can't expect much. I could just say that's peer to one other peer. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to have a conference call on the plane with it.
Well, even Teams can't do that properly half the time. How many times do you look at it and somebody's been clipped off or kicked off the call and you're like, this is online, man. This is on my super internet. Why is this a thing?
With the whole offline thing, like another aspect that I don't know if you have dealt with much or needed to, because a lot of stuff is kind of like you have a connection and you do something with it when you can. But like, what about pause and resume and kind of like architecting things that way? Like if you've got a bigger thing to send around, is that something that you've done much with where you try and implement something like that?
So I have a lot of things like Shiny has like a offline uploader, downloader type thing. So for big blobs, not like your text or even your offline data. It's more like,
like I'm uploading a big image and I want
an image.
Get it there.
Yeah. So it might be like a fully, like this is my 15 meg selfie that I want to go through, and I want it to compress on the server so the server can see like, here's your ultra quality, here's our compressed version, here's our analytics, the whole 9 yards, right? So often people aren't really, I guess you could say it's an offline scenario, because your app, you can't just do HTTP client, send the blob, and then if the user backgrounds your app, hope that the image made it, because usually it's just been canceled. And that image, when you do that, is just, poof, it's gone.
Yeah.
Because it just trimmed, like the app just stopped and that's gone. So there is technologies in Android and iOS to background or to queue up your downloads or uploads. And those are cool because they'll work with, oh, you've got internet, send the thing. Oh, you don't want to send it over LTE, you want to wait for Wi-Fi.
Right.
Those are kind of some of the conditions.
Do they do any like of the, just back and like the with I don't know, like I don't even know anymore if HTTP has, like I know there's like range requests and stuff like that. Like, is there a spec where it's like, I negotiating at the HTTP protocol level, an upload that didn't make it all the way through, and I know where it stopped and that kind of stuff and how to pick it back up. Like, does it do any of that for you?
So downloads, yes, that's the range requests are there. They
Right.
kind of usually just work. For uploads, there is a spec. Apple's kind of on it, but Apple's appling the protocol as they do. So I'm not really sure where we're at with uploads. And the problem is sometimes you don't know. Did it get a good CRC? Like you gotta get. I'm almost of the frame where you don't want to pause and resume based on connection, because it's like, did those last few packets actually eat dirt? In which case you're going to be like, here's my photo, and in the middle of it, my face is all black, right? I mean, it's going to be anyways, but like extra pixely, like a Minecraft character, right? So I don't know. It's pick your poison, I guess.
What made me think of it was when I mentioned dial-up, and thinking back to the days where, you know, your connection would drop in the middle of a big download. Like, I don't know if you ever got this, like you'd queue up something overnight, and then it would you'd pray in the morning it would have gone through. And then eventually, you know, I got onto like the auto dialer thing and the download managers that knew how to resume.
I remember the app too, because it was fantastic back in the day.
Yeah.
Get Right.
Yes,
do you remember
that's it?
It had that cool little red and blue icon.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the day. That thing was awesome in its day. And it would go out and it would multi-part download like different parts of the stream.
Yep.
Oh, that thing was massively ahead of its time.
There's a library out there too. I mean, I haven't really bothered with it lately since I finally, you know, got reasonable internet here. But Aria 2 is like a library that's kind of like that. It's a newer version, and it'll like split up connections. And it just, if you ever, actually, if you use, this probably is a good one to throw on like a tips and tricks and whatever episode. But if you're downloading Xcode, if you use the app Xcodes, I don't know if you ever use that.
I use it all the time.
There's an option in there to tell it to use Aria 2 to download, and it's just like, it's just amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever paid attention to that option.
Oh, it's so fast.
I got to go download the new Xcode 16 anyways, so because they released the new beta, so I'm going to try it.
So try that out. And then it also made me think of another fun story from back in the day. So with range requests, and this isn't quite mobile, but it is in the sense that with Xamarin, when we used to have the bindings for the support libraries, I don't know if you remember at one point in the SDK manager, those came in like one massive zip file. Yep. All of the versions they ever shipped, they kept just making a bigger zip file. And we couldn't redistribute those because the licensing on those at the time, we were being careful, right? Like it was maybe okay, but it wasn't super clear that like it wasn't covered by the Android SDK license, which kind of said not to do that. So we didn't do it because we want to be careful. And so we had to figure out, first of all, okay, when you use those NuGet packages, we need to get the native files from Google. So as a build task, let's go download that zip file and unpack it for you and get that out. Well, the problem was that at one point, those things are like 300 or 400 megs, right? They're big files. So
I remember too, if there was a problem downloading it though, you had like a corrupt zip file and I'd be like, what did you do to me?
Exactly.
You have to go in and find that directory
over again.
Yeah, delete it and try again.
And I remember too, at the time, there were enough developers in like, areas of the world that didn't have the best internet that just downloading like 500 megs was not great. They might have had like bandwidth quotas and stuff. So we had this crazy idea, my old manager and he had just kind of said like, oh, I wonder if we could just download the parts we need. And I'm like, I have an idea. And so, I kind of knew range request was a thing with HTTP. And I'm like, if they implement this on the server, I know how we're going to do this. And sure enough, Google's HTTP server for those files did implement it, which was great.
Okay.
So what we ended up doing is whenever there was a new version that came out, the zip file itself was version named. So like you could always repeatably download the same zip if you wanted to, which is also necessary here. We would go download that zip file. We would run it through a little tool that would look at the zip and look at all of the archive entries and their offsets within that zip file in the central directory. And then we would just make a metadata file that said, okay, for this zip, we care about these specific ranges. And we don't even have to download like the central directory from the zip file. We can actually just go use the HTTP range request headers, say, give me this chunk of like 1 meg, and I can decompress that myself because I know it's all zip compressed. And then we would just go grab like the 10 megs of the 300 or 400 megabyte file that we needed, which is one of my favorite things that I have gotten to like work on and like figure out and think through, right? Like just a fun challenge to code against. Yeah, it was cool.
Well, and I mean, that's I would say that's out in the wild. You still got to worry about those offline and partial downloads. Well, I mean, on your computer, because 500 megs, I mean, it's still nothing to laugh at for sure, but
yeah, not even today. It isn't, but
well, now Apple's finally fragmented them out, and I'm not sure if we're better or worse, but
I know
we're here.
Well, like Xcode is still the core of it is still pretty big, right?
Oh yeah, it's brutal.
And then then it's like, oh, I got that installed, and now I also have to go install the parts of emulators and stuff that I want to use. So
emulators.
I keep waiting for them to figure out how to like better patch versions or like break it out more into components that are more static. Like it's just
that's never going to happen. If you have an Apple, you have the best internet in the world.
Well, and that's what it boils down to, right? Like you have to, and that was a pain for me before I got fiber here finally, which wasn't that long ago. It's like my internet was decent, but it wasn't that decent, and so I would
you frequently complain about it. So
I would go download the Xcode and I would put it on like my NAS on my network so that I could get it on all my other machines and stuff. And now I just download it everywhere.
It was like your only weak point in your armor where you could actually phase you, because I'd be like, yeah, I just downloaded, and you'd be like, damn it.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting. It's still going. I'm like, yeah, mine's done. Be like, I hate it here. They gotta have better internet. You finally got it. Just for the record, John practically camped out in his lawn.
Oh yeah.
And I'm pretty sure those internet guys were like, oh, it's him again.
Yeah.
Here comes that guy.
At one point, basically somebody said, in not so many words as like, yeah, the reason that you're getting yours hooked up now instead of in like 6 months from now, which was the original plan, it's because we don't want to hear it from you anymore. It's like, great, it worked.
See, but before, you may as well have been in the wild. Your internet sucked.
Yeah, it was.
So there you go. You had to deal with a lot of this junk.
That's right.
Not IoT levels, but were you an LTE connection?
No, we had like fixed wireless to a local provider. And I mean, I paid dearly for it. I had, at the end, I think I had 100 megabits down and 20 up, which it was actually serviceable.
You poor guy.
But it wasn't great.
Miserable.
It wasn't great.
You were in the wild. Now you're non-farmer John.
Civilization and have adequate resources.
You don't have to download all your maps offline overnight so that you can have GPS.
Don't have to use Get Right anymore.
Oh yeah. It's a good app though. It was a good app. That was back in the Windows 98 era. And you had to have that too, because Windows was going to crash, right? So then it would.
Something was going to go wrong.
It was amazing.
Windows was going to crash. Someone was going to call or like try faxing on the second line that the dial-up was on, and anything, any number of things.
So, our packages of the week, I figured was probably, I don't know. There was one we were talking about. We talked about all the maps, so they don't get the title because they had their own spot.
Yeah.
But I wanted to call out. I'm going to call out my own Shiny BLE hosting because that was good for my chat app. But there's another one out there that seems to do like everything. I think he covers way more platforms than I do.
Okay.
And I apologize if I don't say it right because it's a different name. It's called In the Hand. That's the organization, but the library branding is 32 feet, and they do a BLE client and a BLE server. And I think they do a lot more platforms than I do. He cares about Windows, and I think that the person that programs this is actually one of those Windows lovers. But I think he deals with Windows first. Good for you.
Do you think there's a metric version of it too, or
a metric version of it?
Yeah, 32 feet. maybe 32 meters.
Oh my God,
or,
man.
You know,
That's
10 meters or something.
You know, we're done when John starts making those jokes.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what
The other
hell are you
one,
talking about?
the other one I have is, do you think, does this one pull in reactive into it?
No, it does not, John. Mine
Okay,
has reactive.
Good. Yeah, I know yours does.
But it works fantastic. I can deal with all of the Bluetooth errors in one stream.
So
and trust me, if you've done enough support, you want that. You want
what's the difference between, like, you mentioned platforms and stuff. Like, have you used this one much? I'm just curious. Like,
I have not.
What
obviously, because I have my own.
Doesn't, or vice versa.
I have not used this one personally. I think he kind of took, like, by the looks of the source code, he kind of took the same route that you guys did originally with Xamarin Essentials, with your kind of weird static partial stuff.
Yeah.
And so I call it weird because it was weird. You guys really took a kind of coolish approach. Annoying for us DI lovers, but still, it worked.
Yeah.
So it looks like he's got that kind of approach. But again, a wide range of support, async tasks all the way. I didn't check if there was like async enumerables, which, by the way, I know you hate RX. I have considered using async enumerables and getting rid of RX. I don't know. Bluetooth is the one place where I feel RX shines.
Well, RX probably can wrap those too easily, right? So,
well, because there's so many things you have to do with RX anyways. You have to transform the bytes. You have to prepare for errors anywhere in the stream. There's usually multiple connections to multiple characters. This is crazy. The one place you want RX, in my opinion, is Bluetooth. I could take it out of the rest of Shiny. I'd grown about it, but I could take it out of the rest of Shiny and Shiny would be fine. Bluetooth is where it excels. It really should be there. Timeouts, all that stuff. If you haven't worked with Bluetooth, you don't really know how much you want the thing until it's not there.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. But Bluetooth is one of those ones I still have never really done anything with it. But it's always one of those areas that I'm like, oh, that would be fun to use. I just haven't really stumbled upon the right use case for it, I guess.
Time to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking with the Meadow stuff, that because Meadow can do Bluetooth.
Yep.
I was contemplating trying to do that to like do the Wi-Fi setup, right? So like if you ever wanted to actually kind of quote unquote ship a product, an IoT device with that, the one kind of thing that it falls down on right now is like there's the way you configure the Wi-Fi and stuff is like in a text file, right? So I had always had the thought it'd be neat to kind of make a generic Bluetooth-based configuration thing library, like client and server for the device itself.
Well, that's how most of them work now. Like if you configure like an Ecobee or it connects to it through Bluetooth, and because it's like, I don't know how to talk to Wi-Fi right now. Teach me. So it connects through Bluetooth. They talk. You end up asking, can I share Wi-Fi details with this thing that's asking for them? Yes, I can. Over it goes. Bob's your uncle. That thing's up and running on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. And that's almost like, I know a lot of devices also kind of got into they have a hotspot, like an access point, right? And you connect to that and then it does its thing through that. But that's always been clunky to me and kind of weird. So like the whole like Bluetooth is just a really seemingly nicer way to do that whole thing. So yeah, that's one area. But
and they're basically the chipsets are coming built with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth now, like as a solid chip. So it's like, why bother?
Yeah.
But I have to do that with all my smart plugs right now. I have to go and connect to their Wi-Fi. To configure them, and it's like,
it's just a pain. And then like if something doesn't work and like you're in like your basement trying to do it, then you're like, oh, I got to Google something now. I got to flip back to my normal Wi-Fi, and no good. Bluetooth is the way. Well, that's good. Yeah, I'll have to think of a use case that I actually want to do for it sometime, because it's one of those, like I said, one of those areas that I think is a lot of fun to kind of work with from a developer perspective.
Pool sensors, John. There you go.
Yeah, I've thought about that too. I've
math your way into Bluetooth sensors.
I know they're all wired in though already. Although somebody did one, and I think it was using Bluetooth, which I've considered. So I have a pressure sensor. I know we're over time already, but this is the last thing. I have a pressure sensor that goes into the filter, and I'm using I2C to communicate, but the cable is a touch long to do that reliably with, and so sometimes the data kind of gets weird. And so, in theory, I could just put a little IoT chip right on there, battery powered, or even plug it in, like run a cable with USB power. That's fine. And then just Bluetooth the data back and forth to read the sensor instead of trying to hook everything up to the one module, like start breaking it out into individual pieces more.
Connectivity in the wild.
Yeah. We'll see. All right. Well, I think that'll do it, since we're over and starting to get into, random, slightly related but not quite topics. So, if you are going to do anything after the show, it should be to go and, subscribe on YouTube, because this stuff's on YouTube now, for one. So go there, help those numbers out, give us a boost. What did the youngins say? Like and subscribe, smash that like, something like that.
I don't know, man. I don't bother trying. My daughter says the word, you slayed it. And it's like, the hell did you just say?
There was some other ones the other day that I was like, I've never heard that term before that kids are using.
You slayed it, Dad. You slayed it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So go slay and smash that like button if that's what you're gonna do. And then on the slightly older, more mature, well, not mature because that's not true. Clearly, audience perspective. The podcasting side is still there too, right? So there's the 5 stars that you can leave us on Apple, Spotify, all the places. And we did, we'll have to see if we can incorporate this one in the next show. We got some listener feedback coming in now. And if you'd like to send us some as well, maybe we'll even do an episode at some point just based on that, because, it's starting to trickle in.
All right.
Send us that feedback. Gonemobile.io is the website, and you can figure out from the many ways that you can send that feedback to us from that website. So do that. All right. Thanks, all. See you next time.
Cool.